interacting with you.
I gotta mute this thing. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how the internet works anymore.
Oh my gosh, how do I do this?
All right, that's off. Okay, guys,
I'm ready to start
I
the time.
am sick today, and so if anything goes wrong, I blame my cold and this very healthy vanilla cream lights out stout. So thanks for that. I don't know. Anyway, in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of I forgot to push this button here that makes the music fade out so that I can actually talk. Boy, am I just gonna mess this show up today. In case you guys didn't know, I'm fairly sick. I don't know what happened. I got into something, but I am soldiering through it with Devin here, who's hopefully gonna pick up the slack for
me
on episode 56. Man, we've been going a long time.
Don't I always pick up the slack though? 56 episodes. You got to think that I've been doing a pretty good job of picking up your slack.
Yeah, this guy's hardcore, man. He's been sticking with it, making sure to update the show notes that I kind of lazily put together this round. But first, Devin, before we get started, man, what have you been up to?
I've been doing I've been a part of a small skeleton crew for doing some UFC interviews and stuff like that for Access TV, doing audio and stuff like that for them, which has been me working a lot of weekends, which is why the show schedule has been a bit crazy lately. So I apologize for that, but it's been a lot of fun. We've been shooting with the C300 and doing some of the slow-mo with that and everything else. And I'm enjoying that camera more than DJ ever could because DJ didn't like the C300. So, but other than that, it's just been lots of editing after that part for a few, more music artists in Chicagoland and stuff like that. But DJ, how have things been with you and, being sick and coughing all over the place?
Man, being sick is awesome. I love being sick, but I have been editing extremely heavily for the last last 3 months. I've been doing pretty much nothing but editing, and we're finally wrapping up. I finished 27 scenes in a marathon editing session over the last 3 days. That included green screen and a bunch of special and practical effects stuff that we had to get we had to go out to a set and shoot some filler and put that in there. But anyway, what I wanted to discuss, actually, since you're talking about the UFC fights, we were kind of talking about this before the show. When you film something like that, you shoot what, 2 days probably?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how much goes into it because part of it is a lot of that stuff depends on the producer you're with. Some producers who will fully take charge of the editing process, they'll know exactly what they want. And other times you've got producers, it has to do with how they're set up. Producers that will go through and they'll just send it off to an editor and another showrunner that manages how you put all that stuff together. So all in all, we'll probably capture, something like a 20-minute interview that will all probably be chopped down to 2 minutes, which will be, usually like a promo before the fight or during the fight, or something like that. And and then on top of that, we grab as much B-roll as we can, stuff that's interesting. We try to, and of course you're always trying to tell a story with these kind of things. So any family they've got, if they like riding their bike or they've got a motorcycle or something like that, a bunch of stuff like that. So it really depends on what kind of producer you got. You've also got some producers too who will go out and want you to shoot everything, even though what you're shooting will never make it to air because either it has nothing to do with the story or because it's just, the lighting isn't great and it's not a great shot in general and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of depends on who's running the operation. But in general, you spend 2 days, you sleep in a hotel. Usually though, they'll keep you in a decent hotel and, just to make maybe 2 or 3 minutes worth of content. And you'll probably be, lately we've been pulling maybe like 8 to 10 hour days of running around shooting. Most of it is getting from place to place to get all the interesting shots and everything else around there. But yeah, it's a lot of work for very little content, but that's kind of broadcast because they want the best of the best cut. So you got to go out and get everything.
Now, I was watching an interview with the guys that do Drunk History, and that was a really interesting insight into that sort of production. Those guys actually do 2 days worth of shooting and, 8 to 10 hours of drinking to get to the recordings done and to generate a whole 4 to 5 minutes of content. And at first I was like, when I listened to the interview, I thought, oh man, that's ridiculous. You know, why would you do that? And then I started thinking about my own production schedule, and I'm like, wait a minute. I spend an entire day, and if I'm lucky, I get like 3, maybe 4 scenes shot, you know, and maybe I have to go back and do some reshoots because, you know, we missed this or we missed that, or we needed to get a close up of something that we didn't get. And really, I don't know what it is about film production, but it is not nearly as productive as you think it should be. Maybe it's just because of the level I operate at, and maybe, you know, run around doing interviews or that sort of thing. When I do a corporate video, it seems like you go out, you shoot the interview or what have you, and you usually get like 15 or 20 minutes worth of content that you're delivering, or 10 minutes at least. And that takes, you know, 2 or 3 hours. But when you're actually trying to tell some sort of story or gather something, it turns into this ordeal where you're always shooting a bunch of stuff. And then there's always somebody that's like, hey, what if we got this shot? What if we got this shot? And you're going on and on, shooting more and more stuff.
And I think that's important too. A lot of people to consider who are more interested in narrative filmmaking and whatnot is that there's, you know, analysts who are probably way smarter than me in the film industry. There's a reason why a lot of low budget and no budget films hire huge crews, and that's so that they can get all the shooting done within, you know, maybe 2 months or maybe like even 5 weeks or 4 weeks, because you know, every week you rent the gear, that costs more money. Every week you pay your actors, that costs more money. So there's a give and take of, well, if I spend more money getting a bigger crew, I can spend less money in these other areas because we can produce stuff faster. And that's also why pre-production is so important, and you should spend a ton of time on pre-production, because if you can make a lot of decisions in pre-production, you know exactly what you need when you get on the spot. You know, not necessarily that you need to edit it, but, you know, storyboards for complicated scenes and stuff like that can go a long way to make sure your shot list is exactly what you need, and maybe a few safeties, as opposed to if you're just like, oh, we're going to shoot the Y, now we're going to shoot the 2 OTSs and everything else to have this conversation in a room. You end up with a lot of options in post, which is how some people like to shoot. But you also end up taking a lot of time on set getting stuff done. So it's always something to consider, especially if you're a skeleton crew and you maybe only got a few of your friends, is, you know, thinking ahead of time, doing all the planning to make sure you're going after exactly what you need and not wasting a bunch of time getting a bunch of stuff that'll just edit, you know, out of the whole production.
Yeah, storyboards, man. I've worked on shoots without storyboards and shoots with, and it is definitely worth it to spend the money on a storyboard artist, even if it's, you know, just rough sketches to get things sort of sorted out. You can really eliminate a lot of extra shooting just by following a storyboard shot for shot with a good crew. You're like, here's what we need to get, and we get everything, and you're done, and you can completely get out of there, as opposed to sort of this impromptu where someone's like, what if we do this? And you're like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. And then you get to post and you realize, wait a minute, that was dumb. Now we've dove off the cliff already, and we haven't even started the show. Yep. I think, Devin,
it's time for the news.
Time for the news. Oh, Devin's doing a wonderful job of filling in for me today, man. My glasses are fogging up as I'm like sweating and snotting at the same time. It's disgusting. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk about here, and actually this is kind of news for everybody, the GH4 in the gray market. And I don't know if this is just an economic thing that's going on because of the changing currencies or what, but it's come down to $1,099 for a GH4 body on the gray market on eBay. And that's free shipping and everything. And with a combo of the 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8, that's down to $1,699. I've got some links in the show notes for that, but that's basically the GH4 plus a very decent image stabilized lens for the price that the GH4 was originally. Devin, what do you think, man? Is it worth it to go gray market for these great prices on the GH4?
I think absolutely. I mean, I guess, you know, in general, you know, eBay and stuff like that, it's always a little risky depending on the sellers and stuff. But, you know, eBay, even if you're getting shipped across seas and stuff like that, and keep in mind, this is only coming from New Jersey. So it's not exactly like it's thrown on.
Well, they say they're coming from New Jersey, but a lot of these are like drop shipped. So what happens on many of these is actually they have a port of call. And so whoever is selling them from the other country ships them to a port of call, and then the person that works at the distributor picks that up and then ships it to you. And by doing that, they can kind of avoid some of the exchange rate costs and so on. This isn't just a seller, and I've got a link, or man, I'm failing at this horribly today. Whoa. Okay, I'm going to show my screen here. You can see that this isn't just somebody that sells 1 or 2 cameras and disappears. These guys have 12,000 plus positive ratings. If you've ever bought one of these cameras before from eBay, what you end up with is usually basically the same camera. It's just that you have to sign for your order when it gets there. And this is usually to prevent them from being ripped off in some sort of eBay scam or what have you. So you do have to deal with a little bit of hassle, and you do have to be home to receive the camera. But man, a GH4 body, even at current prices on Amazon, that's like $1,400. So you're saving close to like $700 or $800 on this combo kit here.
Right. It's definitely, to me, it'd be worth it because it's still one of the best 4K packages that you can grab. And even with a lens too, which is a great starting lens if you have the money for it. It's a great, 4K. It may not do amazing low light. There's better options out there for low light, but all things considered, a tiny cheap package that does great 4K like this, it doesn't get better than this.
Yeah, keep an eye out for that. I'm not sure why the prices are this way, but it's actually even cheaper than a GX8, which is supposed to be the little brother to the GH4. And the GX8, although just recently announced, is still kind of missing some of the features that the GH4 has with it. So really interesting. I wonder what's going to happen next. If this may be signaling a GH5 coming at NAB this coming year. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to start that rumor right now. Now, next thing that's seen a price drop and sort of some competition is actually the GoPro. Here we have the GoPro Hero Plus. This was just announced, I believe, Monday. And this guy here, it looks like it's a response to GoPro's competition. These sort of generic looking GoPros from China. This is the YI I've got right here. And that's about $80, $70, depending on where you shop. Now, in the past, you had some entry-level prices, but they were still in the 150, 160 range. Now, the lowest level Hero is down to what, Devin? 139?
Yeah, it's or I think 129. I think it comes out to 130.
And then the next up, now they've added the Hero Plus to this, and that's going to be a price tag of $199. Now, what they've also done, which is sort of frustrating, is they've actually dropped the price of the Session down $100. And the Session has only been out for like 2 or 3 months. That's a pretty significant price drop for such a short amount of time.
It's such a risky move because the price drop is probably because they aren't moving maybe as many units as they want. And you're right, it could be a response to some of these cheaper cameras that are coming out that are producing better quality than their extremely expensive camera. I think part of it goes to say, like we've said before, that the Session having it being waterproof without a case and having, some built-in Wi-Fi or whatever options or being simpler to use aren't necessarily groundbreaking features that make people want to spend all that money. But it also kind of alienates some of your customers who maybe recently bought this just a month ago and now it's $100 cheaper. And that always, it's hard for that to sit well. One thing I've liked is Panasonic does drop their prices, but they do it pretty steadily with their GH series, the GH3 and the GH4, just consistently after a few months, hey, here's $100 off. After a couple more months, hey, here's $100 off. And it did it so steadily that I feel like they're really smart about it, unlike maybe Canon, who, do a huge price drop on something like a C300, which I actually know somebody who just bought it, and then a month later, that's when they did the huge price drop on the first C300, and they talked about and everything. Yeah, and that makes it hard to keep your customers around when you devalue their products that quickly. So I think Hero's concerned, but I don't think, from what I've heard, a few rumors and stuff like that, I think Hero won't have too much reason to be concerned for much longer. Part of the reason why you're seeing such great performance out of these knockoffs is because a lot of the time they're actually using the same sensor technology. They might throw in different features or different software for denoising and stuff like that, but they're all kind of sharing the same sensor. And I've heard several rumors that the Hero is working on trying to actually developing their own sensor, probably in a partnership or something like that with Sony, but they're trying to work on their own technology rather than what the Chinese companies are doing, which is the same thing that GoPro's been doing, which is throw a sensor in there, wrap software around it. I mean, you still need R&D for firmware and for apps and features and everything else, but It's really kind of like a package deal. And then you come up with a battery and you stick it all together and you power and you go, okay, we have a camera. And all these other companies are creating knockoffs because they're like, yeah, that's not terribly hard. You know, we've been doing that too. But I think Hero has been slowly working up, or GoPro rather has been slowly working up to produce their own sensor so they can really say this is our own camera and you won't get quality or features like this out of anyone else because we've built it from the ground up. They haven't done that yet, but I think in the next version, when we're looking at what might be called a Hero 5, that's when they'll actually be using their own sensor. So it'll be exciting to see that if they come out with that soon.
I wonder if they'll actually get to it in time, though. Now we have a bunch of competition that's using similar tech, and Devin's absolutely right. Like, if you want to see what's going to happen in the next Hero, in the past base or the next GoPro, you would go to, and I used to know the company's name off the top of my head. I don't now. They create an entire system on a chip with a board, with an image sensor, and it's a Sony sensor. They put it all together, and then they slap a lens in front of it, and then that's basically the guts of a Hero 4, Hero 3, and it's been like that consistently. If they continue to work on this, like the Session is basically just an evolution of that process. They haven't really changed anything. They've just changed the form factor. If they get to it by next year sometime, well, what do we have right now? We have stuff like the Olympus Air. We have the E1 camera that I have on its way to my house right now, which I'm actually excited about. These are cameras that are in the same price range as a Hero 4 Black Edition, but now they have interchangeable lenses. So now you have the option to go with whatever you want. And it's a bigger sensor, so better low light performance, better control. You know, in the past, what's the bane of many Hero 4 Black Edition users? It's the fact that you can't change any of the settings. It's all sort of on autopilot. I mean, they have Pro Tunes, but that's not a solution. If I want to change my ISO settings, or I want to change my shutter speed, or whatever. And it's pretty frustrating when you have a camera that sort of has stuff that's on autopilot and there's nothing you can do about it.
Absolutely.
In a few years, you know, I mean, next year, maybe, like, what are we going to see if these cameras are already hitting the market from, you know, sort of independent developers, you know, pretty soon? Other companies are going to actually hit this hard, and Sony's been basically nailing down their sensor tech and getting their sensors into everything. What would stop them from coming out with a GoPro type competitor? I mean, I know in the past they've had one, but it's sort of been lackluster. They could easily put something nicer into their camera and they compete with GoPro.
I think for a long time too, GoPro has had the lead on this, because while we do kind of knock off and say, oh, it's a sensor, and they kind of just put a battery onto it and call it a day, there's still a lot of R&D to make it small, to make the battery life good, to make sure the camera software is stable and everything else. It's just that all the other competition that's doing this, which are usually like, you know, no-name brands that we've been talking about, they the technology's advanced so far that for them to develop features like Bluetooth and remote viewing is almost trivial. Because of, you know, how much people have already spent time and effort developing these things. You know, it's kind of like when, you know, PHP websites or something like that first came out. It was a really big deal to code and engineer one. And now that PHP has been out for so long, which is a website code kind of a thing, no one really codes it anymore. You just grab somebody else's library who's done a way better job than you ever could, and you use their libraries in order to make your own content. And so it's the same thing with Arduinos and all this stuff for small electronics, that these other camera companies are like, well, adding, you know, Wi-Fi and stuff like that is really easy. And to make it work well and have it pretty stable, that's becoming a trivial matter. And so now GoPro is running out of things that are like, you know, we're the best, except they still have the best image quality, but you're paying so much for it. And it's almost starting to reach that point, like a lot of cameras are, where it's like, you know, I don't mind necessarily not having the best if it means I could have a couple of cameras as opposed to just one, which has always been a thing with DSLR versus, you know, bigger cameras like Reds and stuff like that. And, you know, the whole GH2 versus the Area Alexa argument and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of comes back to that. So what GoPro does next, it'll be really interesting, and I really hope that they come out with something really fantastic that shows re-innovation and they blow away the competition again, but they might not. They might just be like, hey, we'll do 60 at 4K, which then you're like, oh, all right. Which, not that that wouldn't be amazing. Not that I wouldn't love 60 at 4K and probably end up buying that camera. We just know that it's like, well, eventually your competition is probably going to start catching up, and they'll give us a 4K camera for maybe $150 that almost looks as good as your 4K camera. So it's just one of those things that I'm hoping down the, the next iteration is going to be like a new sensor and probably some really cool tech to go with it that really makes us excited again to use GoPros. But otherwise, if you need a cheap GoPro camera, there's some great options out there. So
now
keep that in mind.
I want to throw this against you here. I know it's not really in the show notes, but the new iPhone 6s has 4K shooting capabilities, and this has been available in several of Samsung's line of phones. Is this going to cut into the market, do you think, of like a Hero 4 Black Edition and in general, like 4K handheld shooting? Because, wide angle phone that you already have, a device that you already paid $400 or $500 for, $300 or $400, depending on your contract or what have you. And now, like, maybe you just use that instead of using a GoPro.
For the most part, I'd say no. I don't think that those market shares necessarily overlap as much as one could think, because GoPro has always been sold as an action camera,
a
as
lifestyle
take me
brand.
in the water. Yeah, well, and it's like put it on your surfboard. It's like take me out, go on adventures with me, whatever.
I know that's what you think, though, but we've talked about this before. How many people actually do that in reality?
No, yeah, absolutely.
Because you think you're going to do, you're going to be free diving off of a cliff and like parachuting in 2 days.
Sure.
And, pretty soon you're going to be scuba diving with sharks or, whatever wacky thing you think you're going to do. And you get it and you realize, wait a minute. I'm still the regular person that does the regular stuff every day. Like, A, hangs out with my kids. B, walks around my house.
I don't know, because for me, the GoPro, I've never considered the GoPro like a better video option than my cell phone. I know it probably is in a lot of respects and has been for the past couple of years, but I've never thought of it that way. I've always thought, well, I could use my camera phone, my smartphone for doing it. And I even have a Samsung phone that shoots 4K, but it's one of those where I use the GoPro because I want to use a dedicated camera. The same reason why somebody would use a point and shoot instead of their cell phone. They're like, I use my cell phone to make calls. I don't want to run out of battery before the end of the day. It's one of those that it's great to have. If I have nothing else, I can pull out my phone and get something really quick. But if I'm actually setting out to go record video, I want a dedicated device for that. You make a good point. I think that a lot of people are really wowed by the 4K out of the iPhone. And you're right. It may stop them from getting a small portable video camera, but I don't think that's the majority of GoPro's market share. I think a lot of what GoPro has to offer is specifically for things like waterproofing, because just about every GoPro video I see somehow needs waterproofing or protection. And usually people are hanging it on the outside of things. Like when I see a GoPro in use, you're right. There are people who just buy the GoPro and then don't do much with it. But I've also seen people too, who even if they don't, they may not be some, like you were saying, skydivers and stuff like that. I bought a used GoPro off of eBay that included a memory card, and the person didn't wipe the memory card before they gave it to me. And all that was on it, though, was footage of a guy longboarding, around his neighborhood, which isn't like, the crazy GoPro videos where they're going 80 miles an hour on some, curvy road. He's just riding around the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's the one I was actually going to throw out there. I see skateboarders and skateboarding kids all the time with like a selfie stick, and they're not even doing anything, remotely entertaining. They're just skateboarding around the neighborhood with a selfie stick. Or,
Sure.
BMXers are jumping a little ways into the air with their, camera attached to their
right. But here's the thing. If I don't know if you've done any skateboarding. I used to skateboard when I was younger, and you get trashed a lot. And for me to take this expensive like phone and try to like record videos where I know I'm doing something where I might fall and stuff gets thrown and stuff like that, considering how delicate we treat our smartphones because of how easily they shatter, I don't think that anyone's going to be like, well,
$40 rubber bumper case, right?
No, dude, because asphalt finds a way to get past the case and puncture the screen. I've seen it happen so many times.
It's true.
But I'm just saying that also, too, you don't get the mounting options with the iPhone. And well, definitely not secure mounting options. It's like, let me try to hold onto the iPhone really tight and then give you a quarter, a 1/4 thread. GoPro, on the other hand, like when I got that footage from that random eBayer, he had it mounted on his helmet. That's not something that you can do. And I think GoPro's known that. They're like, we need to make sure we can mount on anything at any time very easily, because that's important. Just as important it is making a camera that is virtually indestructible, as opposed to your iPhone, where if you drop it while you're drinking coffee, it's destroyed. So I think that I just don't think there's that much overlap. I think you're right. The occasional person who's like, I want a cool video camera will go, okay, I don't need that video camera. I got my iPhone for it. But other people who, even if all they do is skateboard around their neighborhood and they want to take videos of it, I doubt they're going to be using the iPhone. If they are, I guess they better have some warranty on it, because I've seen people drop a lot of stuff.
Well, the new Apple model is actually to include the Apple Care plan. So I suppose, in a way, you have basically waterproofed your
for the
iPhone
price of a
6s.
GoPro, you can get an Apple Care plan.
Now moving on down the line to things that are priceless and you don't want to lose here. I've actually got this one thrown in, and this is kind of based on a news article that was up on Petapixel. This photographer basically had 10 years of her life stored on mobile hard drives, and not just regular mobile hard drives. We're talking like the sort of like cheesy USB powered units that you just stack on top of each other. 10 years of, documenting China, going all over the world, doing all these things. And she was, saving all of her photos in Lightroom on a drive like this, which is, it's a little ridiculous. And somebody broke into her house and stole 21 hard drives, which is basically her life's work. And she had it backed up to, guess what? Nothing at all. Your life's work
terrible.
Backed up to nothing. Now,
that's a crappy situation all around. And I feel for her. I've been in that situation. I've lost hard drives. But as I'm sure you do, DJ, I definitely take advantage of the fact that cloud services are really cheap. They're really friggin' cheap these days. And it's something that I think everyone should consider, especially for photos. Photos are small. I mean, I do a backup service where I've got terabytes of current project files backed up just in case the house burns down. Because after all, especially if you got paying clients, if you lose that footage, you basically lost that client, because very few clients will tolerate you having to come back and do a reshoot because of some kind of data failure. So, and photos, though, are cheap, and there's several free services. My personal photos, because I don't care about the quality, I actually use the Google Photos. They do limit you to 16 megapixels, but I love the Google environment. I love that my phone automatically ships them off and they get backed up and they're available on all my devices. And they're openable on the web. I can attach them easily as like an email attachment or something like that and send them to other people for my personal stuff. If I was backing up photos for a client, then I'd probably look at several of the other services. You got Flickr, which is an oldie but a goodie. I think, DJ, you actually use Amazon, probably Amazon Prime.
Yeah, let me run down a couple that I actually use. I back mine up to multiple services because I just like to beat my bandwidth.
You're overprotective.
But so one of the things about Google Photos is actually the assistant feature is amazing. If you've never used that, like the face detection, the location detection,
being
all
able to search. You could say search for a car, and it'll show you all your photos that have a car in it. You don't have to tag your photos. It's amazing.
It does bring my dogs up as cats, though. Just putting that out there. That's a little weird.
But it's a start in an amazing direction, yeah.
But now, the other thing that a lot of people don't know about is that Google Photos actually will back up your video files as well. Now, you are uploading these to Google, so, whatever your upload bandwidth is what you're limited to. And if you have terabytes and terabytes worth of footage, probably not the most practical way to go unless you have symmetrical, gigabit fiber to your house or something like that. But that is an option if you have smaller projects and you need to back them up. The other thing it does is it creates like little vignette videos for you. And I've actually given these to clients as hey, look what I made for you. And I didn't say anything about where they came from, but like Google found my footage on my footage drive and like grabbed some of it and put together this cute little like add music here, dancey sort of sounding thing with like different shots of the behind the scenes and everything else mixed together. And it turned out so well that I was like, here you go, guys. And they're like, oh, that's so nice. We didn't even add that into the contract. That's great that you did that for us. And it made me look like I was doing the extra.
Sure, yeah. Just
but
using Google's free service.
The other thing is Amazon, if you pay for a Prime account, Amazon will give you unlimited photo backups, and there's no limit on size, and raw files are welcome. So, I don't know very many people now that don't have a Prime subscription. I mean, I'm guessing, Devin, you have a Prime subscription. I have a Prime subscription. My wife gets one for free because she's a student. Dozens of people I know have a Prime subscription. And while it's not as slick of an interface as Google Photos, it is a very good way to back your stuff up. You can just grab your folders, back them up, and you have everything. And I'm smacking stuff in my room right now. Oh man, my medicine is kicking in.
Sure. I can, for video backups and my video production, my workflow is actually pretty easy. I mainly, because I don't have a lot of money, so keep that in mind if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of money looking for backups, is that my SSD, I've got like a 500 gig SSD, and that's my project drive, because a lot of my projects aren't that big because I'm not shooting 4K RAW or something ridiculous. So
eat your legs.
I've got a 500 gig SSD that makes it pretty fast to work off of, do renders off of, and everything else. And then I've got, I've actually got like 2 Western Digital 1 terabytes that are rated together, but that is kind of an archive drive. It's like 2 terabytes. And every night I've got a piece of software, which, whether you're Mac or Windows, there's lots of software like this out there. But every night we'll go ahead and copy any changes to that SSD over to my drive. And so that goes ahead and makes sure every night that I've got a copy on 2 physical drives in my house. So if one drive fails, I still have another copy. And then I actually use Backblaze because I got a really good deal on it, not necessarily because I think they're the best. I have a Backblaze account that allows me to go ahead and every night it automatically starts at like 3 a.m. and starts uploading any changes to my archive drive. So therefore, as long as I don't load it up too fast, every couple of days, that's pretty current and backed up with everything else that's going on. So at the end of the day, I've always got multiple copies in front of me. So if a drive fails, I can continue work immediately. And then I also have a backup option in case the entire thing goes, there's a giant surge or something blows up. I've got all this stuff in the cloud, and even though it can take a long time, and we're talking days,
really long time,
I can pull stuff down. Backblaze, I don't know about how the other ones work, but Backblaze actually will let me just select certain folders and say, okay, send me that as a package. Backblaze will take a couple of days to turn that into a downloadable link, but then they'll give you a download client and a download link, and I've used their service before because I did have a RAID failure, and it worked. And so, and I like too that I can hand pick what I want to get, even though I can't get it immediately. So something to consider if you're looking for these services and stuff like that. It helped me in a pinch before. So, but yeah, if you're photos, there's lots of great services that are cheap for photos.
Now, on the video side of things, and actually, like, my setup's a little extreme. If you look behind me here, that tower right there, it represents 8 4 terabyte hard drives in a FreeNAS array with banded dual Ethernet ports, so that I get about 150 to 200 megs read-write out of it. Then over here, I've got, let me see, yep, right here. This is a Drobo. I just picked that up, actually, and I drive shucked a bunch of 4 terabyte portable drives that I had laying around and shoved them in there. And now they're all in one convenient single power supply source that I can kind of carry with me. And actually, Drobo does include a really nice little carrying case for this that makes it pretty easy to make it portable. I know in the past, Drobo's not been the most reliable as far as speed goes, and a lot of them, the earlier versions, only included USB 2.0. Even the USB 3 implementations were a little bit iffy. This particular version, which is the latest USB 3 4-bay unit, which is really affordable, it's like $275. It's providing about 200 read-write speeds, basically the same as my FreeNAS with 2 Ethernet links. So sure, I can work off of that in a pinch if I have to. But then my main system, I have 2 1 terabyte SSDs that I work off of, which, that's a really expensive option, guys. It's getting cheaper, but even the 850 Evos that I'm using right now, I want to say they're like $500 a piece. So, just in editing drives in my system, I'm talking $1,000. And then 4 terabyte drives, I think I'm paying like $145 or $150 for the Reds. So, not bad, but still very substantial.
Yeah, but back to the story. What thief is interested in 21 external drives? They're so freaking cheap. How do they plan to turn that around and sell that for any kind of a profit? Especially too, if it's 10 years of her life, how many of those do you think are like half a terabyte, 1/4 of a terabyte, little drives? I find it nuts that somebody would break in and be like, "Oh, see if she's got any external drives. Let's." You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, grab the TV, grab the computer, but external drives, it just seems like a waste of time. But, oh well. But your backups are expensive, but are nice and convenient and immediately in front of you. I would say first, people try to look at external backup options because they are cheap. There's monthlies that go for $12, $15, sometimes even less than $10, depending on the service. Go with those first because offsite backup is usually much more important than necessarily having backup straight in front of you right away. A backup in general is necessary, but I would say the first thing to do is try to get meteor-proof backup, which is anything that's offsite.
Yeah,
because
it
is
in
important.
The same room, a fire happens, I lose everything. Although I do have insurance, so
water
if a fire happens, like hopefully my insurance covers all of my lost footage and so on, and pays everybody back for what I'm into them for not delivering projects.
Sure. Oh boy.
Oh man. Okay.
Probably move this on. Speaking of
we've
video,
beaten that one like a dead horse. Moving on down the line to the Paralinx announcement. If you're not familiar with Paralinx, they were well known for the Arrow, which was one of the first sort of affordable wireless transmitter units for video. The thing to note about the Paralinx system in general is that they aren't using heavy compression on their transcoding to send footage from one unit to the other. There are things like the I think I've got a link to this. I believe it's called the Nexus, not Nexus, Nearest. Yeah, the Aries. There we go. The Aries unit. And
the poor man's wireless video monitor.
Yeah, these are only $169, but I've tested them out before. They're a bit flaky. Obviously, there's a lot of compression, so you're not probably going to be recording your output from your wireless unit, and the latency is in the 4 to 10 milliseconds range, whereas the Paralinx units claim 1 second. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is they've actually announced a new version. It's called the Ace. The Ace is $1,300 for the HDMI version, about $1,799 for the SDI version. And the cool thing is it can run off of either LPE6 batteries or any battery plate that you can strap to it, because the voltage range on this is between 7 and 17 volts. So really easy to build a power source for this. Very sexy little units, very spendy, but not nearly as spendy as wireless video used to be. Devin, what do you think about these guys?
No, and I think that's definitely it. If you're looking for doing wireless video and you don't want to go with the cheaper like we talked about before, Nereus or whatever they're called. This seems like a really good system. I haven't used it myself. I have used the cheaper stuff, and the cheaper stuff is annoying because they're USB powered. So yes, USB power packs are like cheap and widely available now, but the USB plug is not even like that great of a plug. It can become unplugged easily. It has no kind of locking mechanism. It doesn't even have a lot of pressure behind it like HDMI does. So having units like this that can actually run off proper, I don't want to say proper, but general video batteries, filmmaking batteries and stuff like that you'll have around, being able to run off of those is huge for me, just for that fact alone, without having to develop your own system or something that runs off of 5 volts USB power. But also the fact that you can transmit this to 4 receivers. Now, what's interesting though is that I wonder, this is definitely for the pro market or prosumerish market and stuff like that. It looks like it's built well. I'd love to get my hands on one of them, but it's interesting because cameras now, in order to because they can't necessarily keep pushing higher resolutions and everything else in dynamic range, because I feel like we kind of hit a ceiling in terms of cost and what we're getting back. Like the jump between 1080p to 4K was so cheap. I'm really surprised, but I don't think the jump from something like 4K to 6K or 8K or something like that is going to be cheap for a very long time. And by a very long time, I mean a couple of years.
Are you talking about transmitting 4K footage?
Not just transmitting 4K footage. I'm talking about transmitting in general, because what I'm getting to is that cameras now, if you look at the FS5 and whatnot, they're starting to include Wi-Fi access points that allow people to remotely connect and view the feed via their mobile devices, their iPads, and everything else.
That's true, but there's a lot of compression in the stream for that. If you wanted to send these out to something like a dailies, for example, you could technically set 3 of these up. You have a director's monitor, you have a monitor for whoever's hanging out in the back, and then you have one that's going to a recording deck of some kind, and now they can work off of those as proxies until they get the 4K footage or whatever.
No. If a workflow is that big, then it definitely demands something like this. But I'm still thinking as a smaller crew and everything else. Usually the producer or the director just kind of wants to see the framing of the shot and see the lighting. They aren't necessarily concerned with getting uncompressed, great looking video. It depends on what kind of shoot you're on, but I'm talking about a lot smaller crew, running gun and everything else. Video cameras are almost starting to include this stuff because they're looking to add features that people will use. And so that's what I've been impressed with, is that something like the Sony series, anything that has a web browser, whether it's your phone or a laptop or an iPad, can look at a very compressed image, but still they can kind of look at it and watch it. You won't pull focus on it or anything like that. But it's just one of those things where most of the time when I need a monitor that's wireless, it's just because I want to move the camera around and I need to set up a monitor for the producer or who's ever managing the project. And whoever's managing the project doesn't necessarily care about getting the highest fidelity. They just want to make sure that they're getting everything that they want to get from that shoot. So it's totally different. You're right, especially for recording proxies or something like that. Have it at the DIT station. I get all that stuff, but I'm saying that the cheaper end solution of these that I used to like always want to get and put on my camera and everything else, I almost see them possibly going away, where even DSLRs are now having Wi-Fi options to, kind of remotely view what you're shooting. I mean, it's not perfect yet. It's got a long way to go. But
the problem is with Wi-Fi and its latency, basically, because, by the time you transcode the footage into something else and then you send it off to a Wi-Fi router, it gets sent back as packets to whatever device you're using that's logged into that. You're adding like 30 to 40 milliseconds of delay. And I mean, it's to the point where someone turns their head on set and then you watch your footage and your footage, now he's turning his head on set, and it's pretty obnoxious.
Right. I get that. But to me, timing isn't important in a lot of situations where you want remote monitoring. In some situations, it is really important, and you're completely right, especially like if you're flying a drone or something like that. There's lots of reasons why latency would become a big deal. But even if I was directing a project and I wasn't the DP, if I'm in the same room and I'm not like in the back of a truck or something like that, if we're trying to monitor something on the road or remotely or something like that, I just want to make sure the framing's good, that I have the kind of shot I'm looking for. And that's all I care about. I don't necessarily care about seeing like real-time, high quality and all that kind of stuff like a focus puller would. A focus puller needs to see all that detail and they need to see it in an instant. But I'm just like, I don't see where I would use it unless I was pulling focus or in a situation like that where I need that real time.
Yeah, see, anymore to me, like I used to run into situations all the time where someone was like, I want to see what you see and I want to see it over here and I want it to be wherever I want to be. And that happened quite a bit. But anymore, I put up a single monitor that everybody can kind of walk over and look at if they'd like. And a lot of times, if you're shooting something where people are doing that, I have my camera on a tripod. I run a cable over for them and plug it in. No problem.
Sure.
I used to try wireless solutions, but then I was like, well, wait a minute. It's silly to put in a wireless implementation when really I'm not, pulling focus with this. I'm not doing anything, crazy where I'm moving the camera around.
And steady camming it.
Exactly. And if I'm going to do a steady cam with a follow focus, I'm going to have two operators. I'm going to have the steady cam operator and I'm going to have the focus puller, and he's going to have a nice wireless solution that enables him to see exactly what's going on and follow focus. That's when you need it. And for a lot of people, that's sort of a rental application as opposed to an owning application, unless you really need a wireless monitor. Now, there are a few solutions that I've come across that it would have been nice. Like you get your camera set up on a crane and you're like, okay, I got the camera all set up. And then you forget to run a cable down for a monitor and you slap yourself in the forehead and realize, wait a minute, what am I doing here? But, even that, like once you get the cable set up and you're good to go, you don't have to worry about it. If you're transitioning between a lot of different mounts and stuff like that, I don't know. I still think 1 millisecond delay is really sexy. That would almost be worth $1,300 if I could justify it.
I don't know. Even for me, 5 milliseconds is fine. I know a lot of people like are trying to get down to that one. I've worked on systems that have 5 milliseconds of delay and everything else, and 5 milliseconds is not a lot. I've sat here and like tried playing on gaming monitors that are 1 millisecond versus like 10 or 15 millisecond. And it's one of those where it's, to me, as long as it's like less than 25, I barely even notice it and I'm really fine with it. But it is sexy to see that, and it's sexy to see that they're using more widely available batteries rather than rigging up your own solution. And two, in general, I've loved their stuff in the past, and I think this price point makes it really great for people who need that in their workflow. But like I said, I don't necessarily need my workflow, and most times I would actually be super happy to have a camera that just has Wi-Fi and people can just connect with their own devices, because most of the time people have their own device to, you know, run around and sit wherever they want or whatever and look at the shot. And most of the time they just want to make sure it looks good. They aren't going to watch it right then and there because they're in the same room. They just want to make sure it looks good. So
I've actually caught a couple guys that continue to get repeat clients from certain customers, and it's because they hand out iPads for free.
Yeah.
Everybody that shows up, and they're like, here, log into our media server and you can watch what's going on.
Do you know what system they use for that?
I want to say there was a Black Magic setup they had and they were just rebroadcasting, but I'm not 100% sure. One guy, he actually had it built into his camera. You know what? My brain is not working good today.
That's quite all right.
But if you look at some of the specs on like the newer cameras, like the LG 300 from JVC, the FS5, those have built-in Wi-Fi media hubs internally. And I believe Blackmagic sells several Ethernet versions of the same thing, where you can just basically plug HDMI into an Ethernet port, send it off to wherever, and then it goes to your Wi-Fi hub and you can distribute it out. Some people actually just give you a web page address and then you type in an IP address at your device, and that's how you bring up the video stream.
Sure. Yeah.
Lots of different ways to do it. But the point I was actually getting at is less about the tech, because I don't actually know how he's doing it, but more that he was buying his clients off with iPads, and I thought that was kind of funny.
That's something, you're right. That's something we don't think about. But if you shoot a lot of corporate video and stuff like that, the client experience can sometimes be just as important as the footage you capture. In general, I mean, if you're a really, fun person to work with and stuff like that, and you jive well with clients, that's always a big positive, and that, can really help to mean repeat business along with having good quality video. But even if you make the best video in the world, if you're difficult to work with and difficult to get a hold of and stuff like that, people will go to other places to get their videos done. So if you're part of the corporate scene and stuff like that, you're right. People will do little things here and there to make sure their clients have a very premium experience with them. And it can lead to more business, whether it deserves it or not.
Now, moving on down the line to stuff that's less client-based and more camera-based. I've got well, we actually talked about it. This is the Mitakon 0.95 25 millimeter. Okay, let me start over because, man, my cold medicine is working good on me. This is the Mitakon 25 millimeter f/0.95 lens, and it's sitting next to the Panasonic 25 millimeter f1.4. Now, the f1.4 is significantly larger. Devin, you and I were kind of talking about this in the previous cast, that this lens looked like it was a little slim. It turns out it's very slim. In fact,
very tiny.
They've really scaled this down. I can't believe that it's smaller than the 25 millimeter f1.4. What do you think?
This Speedmaster
more attractive?
It'll probably weigh.
Or does it make it more plastic?
It'll probably weigh like a good, 2 pounds or something like that, as most of these metal lenses do. But the Speedmaster, it is a tiny lens for only for f/0.95. This is the smallest I've seen it, because both the SLR Magic that we've been talking about, comparing it to, and your the
Voigtlander 25 millimeter f/0.95.
Yeah. Those are both kind of roughly the same size lenses. They're pretty long for 25 millimeter on such a small sensor size. So it is interesting to see this thing so small. But it's one of those two that, all things considered, I'm not totally thrilled with some of the shots I'm seeing. Some of the bokeh just doesn't feel as good as, my SLR Magic does. It doesn't look like it has maybe as much flaring issues as mine does, but
is that a plastic mount I'm seeing right there?
I couldn't tell you. It kind of looks like it, but I can't be sure. So the size does make it interesting, especially too if you've got where are they showing it with a Lumix? Is that a what's it? A GX7? Yeah, it looks like a GX7. If you've got something like that, this is a sexy lens to put on it, because it looks like an old Lumix camera. I like the aesthetics of it, but
you're right. The bokeh does look a little ugly
Yeah.
there. It's sort of like
You
smeared
won't be able to
around
see it in
it.
the stream. Check the show notes to get a link to all the promo shots and stuff like that. But the bokeh isn't smooth. It looks like almost, it's hard to describe, but it's a kind of bokeh
More of
that
a
looks
smear.
images. Yeah, it's a bit of a smear. It's not a smooth transition between what's where I'm looking for, between like an edge and a non-edge, if that makes sense. So it ends up looking like almost like when you use LED lighting, you've got a bunch of tiny little shadows. That's kind of what the bokeh looks like. It looks like a bunch of tiny little shadows. So I'm not totally thrilled with that, but understand too, if you close it down a little bit, the bokeh does clean up a little bit. So yeah, though you do get less depth of field, but that's part of the reason why you pay for it. I think that it's going to come with its own disadvantages based on the shots I'm seeing here. I'm still happy with my SLR Magic. Even though I get a little bit of lens flaring, I think the bokeh is way smoother on it. And even though it is pretty soft at 0.95, this lens, on the other hand, does look really sharp at 0.95,
Yeah,
a little bit sharper than mine does.
Well, center sharpness anyway. The corners are a little bit soft. Now,
Yeah.
neither one of us are super picky on our lenses. We're
not
dig
pixel
deep
peepers.
into that. But in general, any of these lenses at f0.95, they're going to be soft in the corners, guys.
Yeah.
That's just the physics of lens optics. You can't get past that.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why when you see Canon lenses and they're like 2.8, or what's it, the Canon 50 millimeter 1.2 is a monster of a lens. And part of the reason for that, don't tell me DJ has one.
Yeah, I have one. I was just looking to see if I could get to it in time for you to finish talking.
Sure. But the 50 millimeter 1.2 is so large, and part of the reason for that is the fact that it can kind of use more of the center of the lens. Part of it is so that it has elements. It's just one of those that the faster you want the lens, the bigger your opening is going to need to be, and not just like, oh, it's a little bigger than my sensor size. Like, we're talking way bigger than sensor size. So DJ's showing off his 51.2 right now.
Yeah, this is a 51.2 wide open, and you can see the massive opening on the back of this guy. It's huge. And compare this to a 50 0.95, but this does have full frame coverage, so they do really have to make a massive piece of glass. This thing is ultra heavy too.
But part of the reason why it's massive is not just the full frame size, but it's in order to get that speed while also getting the quality in the corners. So like he's saying, it's kind of physics, and no one's going to put something that's like a 72 or an 88 millimeter filter size lens on their little micro four thirds camera, because then it's not even going to fit on the tripod, because the lens is going to outgrow the camera in order to get great sharpness in the corners at f0.95. So it's one of those where this is an acceptable fact of lenses of this size that are so small, so light, and then are this fast, is you're just going to have to take a few breaks with them. And most of the time, I'm completely fine with that. I understand it, it, and you work around it. And I'll take the advantage of it being, more portable or being super fast on my micro four thirds.
Well, and really, Devin, think about it. When you're using the 0.95 on your Voigtlander, your SLR Magic, or this Mitakon, you're doing that for sort of a stylized approach to that particular shot. Because otherwise, you're not going to crank down that wide open. Usually, you're going to go in something that would give you an f5.6, f4 range. So f2.8 on a micro four thirds lens roughly would give you about that range.
And as much as people love shallow depth of field and everything else, and I may stand in the minority here, I don't use super shallow depth of field where the entire background is just a blur, because I feel like it does the opposite. You actually start losing depth, because even though people feel like, oh, it's narrow depth of field, so it really stands out from the background, if the entire background just looks like some kind of like colored mosaic painting, you lose that sense of depth, as opposed to if you have leading lines and other compositional elements that help to build that depth. So I rarely even shoot wide open with that lens. Though if I am in low light, I'll maybe do 1.2, because my SLR Magic is pretty damn sharp at 1.2. So I'll kind of sit around that area, maybe 1.4, and I rarely open it all the way up unless you're saying like, a super stylized thing.
Honestly,
or a situation where
I only use my Voigtlander wide open. Like I have like 25 millimeter f1.4. If I'm shooting anything else, I'll shoot on that. If I want wide open, I grab my Voigtlander because it's a heavy lens. And honestly, value of Micro Four Thirds is traveling light. Now, I work with a director on a regular basis, and he always makes me go as deep focus as possible. And his theory is that I'm basically sort of oppressing the viewer by forcing them to only look at the things that I have in focus and basically not giving them the option to look at anything else. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this, but the guy pays the bills, so I do what he says.
You know what? You know what? You're going to hate me for this. I kind of agree with him too. To some point, it all has to serve the purpose of the story. Rocket Jump today or yesterday, Rocket Jump Film School came out with a pretty good video on editing. And I know it sounds weird that we're talking about depth of field and I bring up editing, but it's the same thing when it comes to putting moving images together, is that choosing to go with a wide shot, and then when something important happens that you want laser focus of the audience, you choose to a narrow shot, is the same thing as if you're choosing shallow depth of field or you're choosing large depth of field, is you're telling the audience where to do the looking at and stuff like that. And so if you do a bunch of stuff shallow depth of field, first off, like that's a way to shoot stuff. You are allowed to shoot that way. So I'm not saying that's a bad way to do things, but sometimes too, you can bore the audience. You may have a great vista of New York City and seeing down the streets and everything else and all this depth in the image. And when you do shallow depth of field, you've just made the background boring. You just made it moving colors. So, but if that serves the storytelling, if you want to show somebody who's isolated in this bustling city and everything else, shallow depth of field can certainly do that for you. So it's all important things to keep in mind. It's just usually good to mix it up if you're like trying to learn and figure out what's your groove and what you like and stuff like that, is try different things. Shooting wide open all the time, well, you partially get into that habit because it looks so good on a 5D. And
yeah,
you also
work with other people that are just like strap it as wide open as it'll go and don't do anything else. I want everything to be shallow depth of field, period, go.
Yeah. And that's one of the selling points for the C300. I saw some people reviewing the C300 and they made it a point that they're like, look, we're out here in the middle of the night and look at how high we can turn up the ISO and it looks clean. And they're like, the reason why we would do that is because here we have a handheld shot of a dude walking back and forth and trying to shoot at f1.2. We can't keep the guy in focus because it's so narrow on that camera that you can't do anything. But here we can crank up the ISO. We can close it down to maybe 2.8 or 3.2. And now the focus puller has a much easier time keeping him in focus. But, you know, that's part of style too. Maybe you want the character to go in and out of focus, to have like a nauseating or a jarring feeling or something like that. Like you know, aren't connected with this character. So it all depends on how you want to shoot it and how you want to do it. But these are all things to consider when you shoot, is, you know, try different things and do it different ways. So partially I agree with your director friend of yours. But not that like that's a rule where I'm like, I
work with them all the time and we always get into this argument because I like high frame rates and he likes deep focus. And I'm like, you know, we should just shoot soap operas because that would be perfect, you know?
There you go, man. That's the marriage right there.
Yeah, that's the worst. It's like the worst thing ever.
High frame rates and 3-camera shooting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I need to get out of here because my medication is kicking in. I don't know what my wife gave me, but it's, you know, in my brain now. So Devin, where can people find you, man?
They can actually now find me on Twitter. You can search Devin Hansen.
Wait, what? What's your new Twitter?
That's what I was saying before you interrupted me, DJ.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I made a new Twitter handle called DevoCut because the old one needed to go because it needed to be taken outside and shot. So that's what I did with it. So you can find me at DevoCut, where I'm going to be a lot more active. I mean, if any of you want to ask me a question, you can. I don't know why you would, especially with his Twitter over there. But
send all your questions to Devin from now on, guys. Like, I'm done with them. Devin gets all the questions. They'll be answered in the order he receives them.
But on Twitter, it's mostly just going to be me posting short films, maybe tutorials and stuff like that. As well as maybe do some stuff with Instagram, because I feel like that's the thing to do now, is go on Instagram and take pictures of your rig while you're shooting something. I feel like that's what they all do. If you follow anybody on Instagram that's a filmmaker, that's all they do is sit there and like, hey, this is what we're shooting today. And they just upload a picture of that, of their rig. And it's just like you scroll through their list and it's just like
rig shot, rig shot.
Just rig shot. And I'm like, you said you're a photographer? And you have one subject you take photos of, and it's your rig. But yeah, so feel free to follow me, add me. I'll be adding lots of cool content. I'm not just going to make it a place where I rant about Canon or something like that. So
also look forward to more reviews from Devin showing up on DSLRFilmNoob.com as well as the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
In fact, I was forgetful and forgot to post one that Devin sent me this morning, so that should be going up this evening or tomorrow morning, depending on.
Well, I sent it to you days ago, but it wasn't good enough for you, so I had to redo it.
Yeah, sorry about that, man. My pickiness. On that note, guys, you can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are distributed, SoundCloud, iTunes, and so on. Check out the links below for show notes and anything else that's related to this show. You can also swing over to DSLRFilmNoob.com for the latest updates from Devin and I, and find us both on Twitter. I'm at DSLRFilmNoob, and Devin, you are at
DevoCut.
I'm going to remember that one of these days. On that note, guys, we'll see you next time on another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast.
Oh, you almost made it.
You know what you guys can't see is the pile of Kleenex over here that I've been blowing my nose while Devin's been like long talking for me to fill in. And then I also have two restless dogs down here because we don't normally do the show at this sort of time. So I didn't run them around or get them exercise, and they're attacking my legs. And they actually, I'm not going to show it on screen because my wife would be very upset, but they brought me a pair of her underwear with which to like chew on at my feet. So thanks, animals.
Yeah, no, and me halfway, like normally the cat that likes to hang out here never makes a sound. And then for the first time in like 20 episodes was starting to meow at me, and I had to throw it out the door.
Yeah, this is Hero, by the way, guys. If you're not familiar with my tiny little dog, and it's Hero. It's not like anything reference to. She's like 12 or 14 years old, so not the show. But yes, adorable. Also, you can call me less manly if you would like, because my dog is so tiny.
No, I love that dog.
On that note, guys, that's the end of the video portion. Thanks, Devin, for sticking around and for working with my schedule and yours in order to get the show
I'm always
done.
here to pick up your slack.
And also, special thanks to Devin, guys. If you like those time stamps in the videos, Devin and Mitch both take care of those for me while I'm wandering through the show notes aimlessly. And that happens quite frequently, especially when I'm sick. So thanks, Devin and Mitch, both of you guys, for doing a great job on the show. Show your support for those guys by liking the show or following Devin on Twitter, because I want you to just harass the heck out of him so that he keeps doing the show every single week.
You just keep selling the Twitter thing. You're selling the Twitter thing so hard. You got nothing else to go to.
Yep, I got no. That's it. All right, end of the broadcast, guys. We'll see you next time on another. Wait, I already did that. Okay,
yeah, you already closed out the show, man. I don't know what you're doing.
I think I drank too much NyQuil.
And you disabled comments, so it's not like we got anyone to talk to.
Did I disable comments?
Oh no, I guess they're back. When I first, no, it says comments are disabled for the show. I don't know if that's a problem with YouTube right now on their live streams. But yeah, I was just taking a look at it.
All right. We're killing this horse before it runs out to pasture.
You should probably get some sleep.
Oh my gosh. Later.